Good evening, everyone, and namaste. My name is Nikunj Trivedi, and I am the president of CoHNA, Coalition of Hindus of North America. We are a grassroots advocacy and civil rights organization promoting a better understanding of Hinduism and working on matters impacting the Hindu community. Today is a very important session. This is one of our first to talk about anti-Semitism and Hinduphobia. We're going to delve into multiple aspects of the two forms of hate that are prevalent on college campuses in many different aspects, and the ability of people to kind of understand what these things are, how they're impacting students, what are the concerns of coming out of the colleges, as well as just the general day-to-day experiences of students who are going about their lives. But all of a sudden are subject to these forms of intolerance. And we'll also talk about kind of some of the solutions that people might find when it comes to, doing things on college campuses, making an impact, both for the Hindu and the Jewish community. We've been doing a lot of interfaith work as far as the two communities are concerned, whether in CoHNA or through other organizations. And this has been a very important aspect because only through some of this work, we can understand what's going on with each other's communities, how we can build bridges, create mutual respect and understanding on a whole host of topics, not necessarily just, sort of the negative topics on hate and violence, but also on some of the interreligious understanding, the positive contributions of communities to make our, countries, whether it's United States or Canada, a wonderful place to live in harmony and peace. That is one of our cardinal, I would say, things when it comes to the Hindu traditions from a virtues and values perspective. So, and definitely having talked to my Jewish colleagues and stuff like that, they have a similar kind of concept in their traditions as well. So, having said that, I want to start to welcome our panelists today. We have a very good mix of experts of different types, whether they are students on college campuses or those who have started initiatives and organizations that work on addressing these issues from within the academia, but also from the outside. So let me welcome our first panelist. Tammy Rosman Benjamin is a co-founder and director of the AMCHA initiative and was a faculty member in Hebrew and Jewish studies at the University of California from 1996 to 2016. She has been writing articles and reports about academic anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism and has lectured widely on the growing threats to the safety of Jewish students on college campuses. She has also presented her research and scholarly talks and academic conferences at several universities, including Indiana University, the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Harvard University, and McGill University. Her research has also been featured in several volumes on anti-Semitism, so she has a very decorated history of work in this field. Next, I'd like to welcome Joseph Carlin. He is a second-year student at UC Berkeley studying computer science, and he's a leader in the Berkeley Jewish community. Welcome, Joseph. We also want to welcome Kushi Jetli. She just graduated from OCAD University in Toronto with a BFA in Integrated Media. She co-founded and led the Hindu Students Council at OCAD for 2 years, and she has been an active volunteer in the community and is very passionate for advocating for Hindu voices. Welcome, Kushi. And last but not least, Anjali Agarwal. She is a senior at Texas State University. She has been part of the Hindu community for the past 6 years, working to promote spiritual awareness and youth interest. She has also created an online community called Sanatani Sisters and runs an Instagram page under the name Brahmavadini. So want to welcome all the panelists. Thank you for joining us today. So let's get started. I think what I would like to do is maybe start off, before we get into it, a lot of times people don't know the word Hinduphobia actually has been coined all the way in the 19th century and was used to describe European sort of attitudes and prejudice towards Hindus with 2 S's, the majority of the population of India being Hindus, but also describing others such as Sikhs and others to talk about intolerance and prejudice towards people of India, specifically Hindus. And all through 19th century, you have seen a lot of colonial and racist attitudes that have been featured in newspapers, in mainstream media channels, that have continued. It seeped into academia. It has seeped into many different forms, media, etc. And even today, we find that amplified. So a lot of times, many people are very familiar with some of the things around anti-Semitism, but Hinduphobia relatively is a sort of unheard phenomenon many times for people, and even in that mindset, it's denied quite often. I'm sure we can talk about anti-Semitism in the same way, but I just wanted to set that stage because a lot of times people don't know the word Hinduphobia, and we'll talk more about that as we go forward. So why don't we start with maybe Joseph? You want to start, maybe give your opening comments in terms of what you have been experiencing, what's happening with you on college campus, etc.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Kona, for having me on. So I wanted to start with just a little bit of a background on anti-Semitism. So as most people understand, anti-Semitism is the hatred of Jewish people or prejudice and discrimination against Jews. Anti-Semitism has evolved over millennia. It originally began typically as a hatred of Jewish religion, which was seen a lot throughout the Middle Ages. Um, and in more recent times, with the Holocaust, it was a hatred of a pseudo-Jewish race invented by the Third Reich in order to discriminate against and then eventually genocide the Jewish population of Europe. But today we're seeing a new kind of anti-Semitism that has evolved and is now prominent throughout North America, unfortunately, which is anti-Zionism, that is the opposition to Zionism, to Jewish self-determination, and the demonization and delegitimization of the state of Israel, which is the only Jewish country in the world. As we're seeing across the country, across campuses especially, Israel is constantly being talked about in a negative way. Lies are shared about Israel. There's a campaign to essentially remove Israel from the face of the planet, from the face of the earth. And this has led to much very real anti-Semitism being faced by Jewish students across campuses. Myself personally, I was assaulted on campus right after the 7th of October, the deadliest day in Jewish history since the Holocaust, by people who supposedly are only there to counter and oppose the state of Israel. Meanwhile, on campuses, they are targeting and assaulting Jewish students. And the Jewish community understands that anti-Zionism, which is masked as simply an opposition to a political movement, is a fundamental denial of a Jewish core belief and a part of Jewish identity, which is the connection of the Jewish people to the Jewish homeland, the land of Israel. But on a more positive note, in the face of anti-Semitism on campuses, Jewish students have been resilient. They have stood up to anti-Semitism and have created communities. And something even more promising, I think, is the alliance as I've seen being built on my campus, on Berkeley especially, between Jewish and Hindu students who face similar types of discrimination. And I think that it's really important to highlight that and to focus on these communities that have come together. I'm very thankful to have my Hindu allies and to be an ally of the Hindu community. So with that, again, thank you so much for having me on. I'm very happy to be here in support of the Hindus of North America.
Thank you so much, Joseph. That was wonderful, and we'll get more into that as we go into the sort of the next phase of the session. Next, I want to bring in Kushi Jetli. So Kushi, please go ahead, give your comments.
Namaste, everyone. Thank you, Kona, for having me on. So I go to OCAD University. OCAD, it stands as the largest art and design school in Canada. And unfortunately, within the four walls of OCAD, art schools are supposed to be very liberal, very, very forward, very progressive. However, Hindu students have faced several forms of discrimination and hatred on campus just for being Hindu. So art is such a big part of our culture. However, when many students have tried to make art, including myself, that is inspired by Hindu, our Hindu identity, we have been constantly politicized, called extreme, like Hindu extremist, right-wing nationalist, and we've suffered a lot of harassment on campus for just expressing our Hindu identity. For example, last year we did a art exhibition that was inspired by Hindu art, and all the posters were vandalized a day before the exhibition opened. And the poster says, "No Hindu nationalism in Canada. India doesn't need this." And as far as members of our student union publicly called the Hindu Students Council a nationalist right-wing group on campus. And, it's unfortunate running the Hindu Students Council has um, opened my eyes to many such incidents. We were celebrating Rath Yatra, which is a celebration of love of Sri Krishna for his devotees. And there was a petition that was launched against the Hindu Students Council at OCAD University and the University of Toronto that we were promoting extremism, a symbol of hatred, and more than 50 academics in Ontario and all over Canada signed that petition asking us to shut down the event. It's unfortunate that Hindu students constantly have to go through this. It creates an atmosphere of fear and animosity towards Hindu students. We've seen people's attitudes and people's hesitation to join the Hindu Students Council or even to attend events and celebrations like Diwali. We've seen through planning processes, I've seen other members just sitting and brainstorming on any elements of the event. Oh, I think this could be a little bit more problematic, or this could be perceived that way. And while all we're trying to do is just celebrate our Hindu heritage. So it's unfortunate that these things keep happening on campus. And even though we're constantly advocating against it, it's unfortunate because it's so spread out that Hinduphobia is present at almost at every level of administration and academia.
Wow, indeed. I remember that episode very because we were working on it together. It was quite messed up. I mean, in terms of how a bunch of privileged academics joined hands to really target a Hindu organization, a student organization on campus and deny celebration of a sacred festival that has been going on for literally thousands of years, right? And so thank you for sharing that. Anjali, go ahead, please. Share your thoughts.
Namaste, everyone. My name is Anjali, and I am a student at Texas State University. And to carry on from what Kushi said, in America, we faced something very similar, as some of you might have heard, when the Ayodhya float was being blocked from being part of the parade in New York City. And I just agree with her on so many levels that yes, Hinduphobia exists on so many levels, especially around in universities and colleges across America. But personally, I'm going to share one experience that I remember from from like 2 years ago. And it was one of the most disturbing experiences of my life. And I still, to this date, have no idea why it happened. So what had happened was I had my personal Instagram account and I had received a DM from somebody and I opened it. And at first I was shocked. And then as I kept reading, and that just turned to disgust very quick. And this person didn't just stop at political rhetoric. For background, this person from their messages seemed to be a Khalistani supporter. And this was back then when things were getting a little bit wild. But this person didn't just stop at political rhetoric. They crossed all boundaries of decency and they were making disgusting comments about Hindu gods and goddesses. And personally, I had never, and this was back when I was starting out in the online community, and I had never seen anything like this happen to me. And it was just very eye-opening that someone could attack the religion that is so close to me and my community in like such a perverted way. And the worst part was I didn't even know this person. And they had shared details about me that nobody else, like, my last name, everything was hidden because social media has made it dangerous for us to fully identify ourselves. And so even through that person knew my last name and stuff. And I had realized that they weren't just here to troll me. They were here to, they weren't just trying to intimidate and degrade me. Like it was clear that this was targeted harassment, and it was rooted in a deep and hateful desire to tear down everything that I believed in. And this experience had left me very feeling violated, not just as a Hindu, but as a person. And I think it's one thing to disagree with someone's beliefs, but it's a completely different thing to do something like that and try to use disgusting language and threats to silence or shame somebody. And the sad thing is that I know I'm not the only person who's gone through this. I'm sure that there have been instances like this, and a lot of us who identify as Hindu, who try to spread the beauty of our religion online, who try to inform others of what's going on in the world, are torn down in similar ways, or it's attempted to tear us down. And I feel like we should actively, and community, we should actively fight against this hatred and rise above it, so that no one can tear us down. And a couple other things that I'd like to talk about. As everyone knows, that in textbooks, especially in America and even in India, how Hinduism, Sanatana Dharma is portrayed is extremely shocking. Like, for example, the caste system, the most basic thing. They're misinforming people on a level of like elementary school, a high school level. They don't teach anyone what Varn is. They will teach the caste system, which is more societal than it is religious. And that is just something that's always confused me. And I feel like it's something that needs to be addressed. And it's just social media, it's universities, it's textbooks, it's everything. It's our entire world it's like it's against us for some reason. And another example of this is yoga. Yoga is being called demonic online on platforms like Instagram. And people from other religious communities don't agree with our ways. And when they don't, they use horrible words like the word demonic to put us down. And I think that with proper information and with respect for others' beliefs, this should stop happening. But that was basically what I wanted to go over, is in every aspect of life, whether it's online, in person, in our education, it's everywhere. It's very deeply rooted, like everyone else has said, and it will definitely take a lot from the Hindu community to be able to get rid of this and properly inform people. And I feel like with allies like the Jewish community, this could be done, and we could both stay safer and inform people.
Awesome. Thank you, Anjali. I think that was great. I think the aspects that you mentioned about sort of like, calling our sacred festivals or sacred traditions demonic, targeting us, even doxing us, pretty much doxing online. There's so many of these types of forms of hate that come from misunderstandings, but also an agenda, right? An agenda that's deeply hateful. It's not just misunderstanding. Sometimes people actually know what the real deal is, but they just hate you so much that they can't get over it. So, I mean, I want to bring Tammy in to talk about kind of the work that AMCHA has been doing on campuses. Maybe not a lot of people, especially in our community, know that. So maybe you want to give a little bit of a background about what the AMCHA initiative is and how you guys have been focusing on this for all these years. So maybe, and I know Tammy, I do apologize if you have to talk more, but please do share your thoughts on that.
Sure. So I was teaching, as Nikunj said, I was teaching for a number of years, Hebrew and Jewish studies. So I was very connected at the University of California, Santa Cruz. I was very connected to what students were experiencing, and they would come to my office and complain, cry, be very upset at what was happening, not only in the campus square, but also in their classrooms, particularly, and very similar to what Joseph was explaining, this aspect of really being attacked for their affinity to Israel, for their desire, for their connection to Israel, which for, I would say, the vast majority of Jews is a strong one, that we aren't hearing from anti-Zionist Jews. but the vast majority of Jews, at least 80 to 90% of Jews, have a very strong intrinsic connection to Israel as part and parcel of their Jewish identity. So together with a colleague at UCLA, we decided to actually start a nonprofit to actually address these issues. And as faculty, we were we were sort of very data-driven and interested in really sort of collecting data about the problem that we could bring to university leaders, administrators to address it. So we started an organization called AMCHA Initiative. AMCHA is a Hebrew word that means your people in Hebrew. It's about the Jewish people who calls themselves a people. And we started an organization to actually document, keep track of incidents that happened all over the country, to investigate. We've written close to 24 reports about the data that we've collected, looking at trends and trying to understand exactly what's happening, where it's happening, why it's happening, in order that we could actually do something about what's happening, which is the sort of the other thing that we do, which is to combat anti-Semitism. And over the years, we've engaged in a number of different advocacy efforts, mostly directed to university administrators, but also to state and federal officials to actually engage with the problems that we've raised. And we found not just, the big problem is that Jewish students are really being attacked, harassed for their identity. It's a problem that Anjali and Kushi and Joseph were all, there really is very much, I was struck by the commonality of the experiences that you were sharing, that it really all is, that very much it is, as a Jewish student, as a Hindu student on a college campus, you're in a position that many other students are not in, which is that your identity, who you are as a Hindu, as a Jew, is under attack in a way that, as I said, other students don't have to deal with that kind of attack. And for Jewish students, especially post-October 7th, we found that these attacks have skyrocketed. I can speak to the issue of Jewish students, and I wish I could speak more to the issue of Hindu students, but we were on October 6th, the extent of the attack on Jewish identity, the harassment, the discrimination of Jewish students for their identity as whatever it is, pro-Israel, or even just not condemning Israel, even just their assumed connection to the Jewish state, made them vulnerable and open to all kinds of harassment, vandalism, as you were talking about as well. Their flyers are ripped down, their Jewish fraternity houses are vandalized with anti-Semitic graffiti and physical assault. And we've had these instances of anti-Semitic harassment, assault, vandalism that, as I said, on October 6th of 2023, were already at unprecedented levels. When October 7th hit, everything, it was just a perfect storm for Jewish students. And we've seen from the unprecedented October 6th, right? We've seen of October 6th of 2023, we've seen of physical assaults alone, a 2,500% increase nationally, a 900% increase in things like death threats against Jews. Right? These are not just sort of speech and, saying I don't like Israel, or Israel is an apartheid state, or even saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which is understood by Jews on campus to be a statement of genocidal intent, to wipe Jews off, as you said, the face of the map. But we've seen real physical violence and threats of physical violence that have gone through the roof. Jewish students right now are simply unsafe on college campuses. And I imagine we see this progression that is really telling, that goes from a kind of demonization of, whatever, of Hinduism, or a demonization of Israel, that actually moves into a demonization and denigration of those who support Israel on college campuses, which moves into rhetoric that is incitement against those students, which moves into the physical violence that we are seeing now directed against Jewish students. And I imagine that same trajectory, one could, presume that that same trajectory would be found with respect to Hindu students. And I think what connects, if I could sort of step back and sort of theorize a little bit, that what connects these two attacks on the identity of these two student populations is this way of looking at the world. It's this paradigm that divides the world into oppressed and oppressor. And they've marked both of our peoples as oppressors that need to be fought, that need to be brought down. In the case of Jews, that need to be wiped off the face of the earth. And so what's happening is really just, I think, a casualty, in a sense, of the bigger issue, which is what happens when you have this war, this essentialist war of the oppressed versus the oppressor. And there are lots of structures, there are lots of ways in which, and it comes down to, I guess we could call it identity politics, that has completely taken over our institutions, but particularly our institutions of higher education. And if you don't fit into those protected minority groups, you are completely vulnerable, not just vulnerable, but you actually will be attacked. Because the whole way of looking at the world in that way, actually, it is inevitable that the objects of the hatred, which are the oppressor groups, will be. I mean, what do you do with an oppressor? What do you do with someone that you've so demonized and delegitimized that they are outside the family of nations? Right? Is that you destroy them, is that they are evil, and you turn on them. And so I think there really is this, I mean, our group, our organization has always said it's not enough to fight this scourge incident by incident, because it's like whack-a-mole. We will never succeed in that. We have to actually look at what is fueling the hatred. Yes, there's hatred. We can agree that that's the case. I mean, not everybody agrees. We've had to make that case, and we'll continue to make that case. But besides making that case and getting people to understand that what's happening on campuses for both Jewish and Hindu students is an outrage, that we have to actually look systemically at what the problem is and to come up with solutions that address the systemic nature of that hatred. And I really do believe that one of the things we have to do is to look at the whole way in which not just how we present the problem, but how we address the problem is right now filtered through the lens of identity politics. And one of the things that our organization is committed to doing is to saying, look, a student is a student, and no student should have to endure the kinds of behaviors that Joseph and Kushi and Anjali are saying that they're having to endure on their campuses. No student, not because they're Hindu, not because they're Jewish, but because they're a student at a university. And no student should have to endure that. And so until we can fight the way in which we've compartmentalized and essentialized everything that has to do with either race or religion or identity, we could say this is not about our identity. This is about the right to express our identity. Because what you're all explaining is not so much about Hinduism and Judaism. It's really about your inability to express however it is that you express your identity. because not every Hindu will want to express their identity like you do. And not every Jewish person will want to express their identity like Joseph, like you do. And so ultimately, we want to say, however it is that you express your identity, you have a right as a student to do that. But right now, Jewish students and Hindu students who feel identified with their religion and the core sort of normative aspects of their religion are being prevented and suppressed and actually beaten up, either psychologically or actually physically, for trying to express their identity. So I'll stop with that, and we can maybe have more of a discussion
Yeah,
about.
no, I think you laid out the framework very well. I think there are a few points that they came out of this, and they resonate quite well in terms of the oppressor oppressed sort of framework that has been put on. It's basically like a Marxist framework, you know. And I can tell you, I briefly grew up in India before I came to the U.S. And India has been fraught with this whole Marxist narrative since of several decades now. Let's put it that way, that essentially creates this idea that the indigenous culture of the indigenous religions, et cetera, that are of Hindu background, right, are considered the oppressors automatically, right? And it's not a societal problem, it's a religious problem, according to what this whole narrative is about, right? And in order for us to do that, to change this, the entire religion must be dismantled, right? It's not, you don't dismantle society, you dismantle the entire religion. In 2021, there was a conference called Dismantling Global Hindutva Conference, and it was sponsored by 50 university departments all over North America, and the who's who of the departments, okay? And in there, you literally had people saying that Hinduism is a danger to universal brotherhood and peace. It must be dismantled. I mean, you will never get away with those statements for different groups and different religions, but for Hinduism, for example. And this is in an academic so-called conference that is being said. It's just like that, as you mentioned, this idea of caste, right? And we almost, California, where you sit, almost passed a bill that would basically create this idea that caste discrimination should be outlawed, but the entire bill was based on a false premise with data supplied by groups that have a very, very strong hatred towards Hinduism. And by the way, those same groups, many of them are active in the anti-Semitic circles, right? They've signed the same petitions. They signed many similar things that would target the Jewish community. So there's definitely intersections that sort of portray the communities as privileged, as sort of like, oppressive, et cetera, et cetera. Politics obviously take its own stance, but as you said, these are students that need to be given that freedom of expression of their own identity. We're so in a world where lots of identities are, you could have a fluid identity, so many things that are accepted. Hindu identity or a Jewish identity doesn't seem to be accepted as much. And there are universities that specifically have I would say statements. So there's a UCSD, University of California at San Diego. Their ethnic studies department has a statement that basically says we will, essentially concludes that we're not going to hire Hindus. Let's put it that way. We're going to hire other people because we fundamentally believe that Hindus are oppressive, and why would we want to hire oppressive people, etc. So there's like this stuff going on, and I know what I've read obviously on news and stuff. There have been faculty groups that have been formed out there to target the Jewish community, right? To basically cancel the Jewish community, to target students who speak up about these issues. So that has been very disturbing. So maybe Joseph, I want to talk to you about sort of what have you seen on Berkeley, obviously since October 7th, but also just kind of just around that, right? It's almost going to be my God, it's going to be a year since that. But what has been going on Berkeley campuses, and how have you seen talk to Jewish students at other universities? What have you been experiencing there?
Yeah, so the scene at Berkeley since October 7th for Jewish students has not really been the greatest, at least to put it that way. I'll highlight one event in particular earlier last semester in the spring of 2024, where a a Jewish group that supports Israel invited an Israeli speaker to come speak on campus about whatever he had to say. He had, I think, just left the Israeli military, but he's an Israeli thought leader. So this group is hosting him to speak. The event was targeted by an anti-Israel organization. They threatened to shut down the event, and the university had a lackluster response, where they kind of forced the event to be moved to a different location, and they provided a little bit of security, but not enough, because eventually, when the event was about to take place in a location that was supposed to be more secured, a violent mob of some 200 rioters assembled right in front of the venue. They broke the glass of the venue. They entered, they forced their way through doors and entered the building, and police weren't able to stop them. They strangled a Jewish female student. They caused multiple injuries to other Jewish students. They spat at a Jewish student and called him a dirty Jew. And this event, unfortunately, is not an isolated event. We've seen similar things happening at campuses all over the United States, all over North America. And I think that the most important aspect to highlight is that when these events occur, when the administration of the university cannot come out with a statement to say that this is absolutely unacceptable, and on top of that, to apply consequences onto the groups and students involved in such violent and unlawful activity, it only allows it to continue. So I think a big problem we have on our hands is with the leadership of our institutions, who time and time again fail to call out and fail to properly apply consequences when people are, are putting forth violent anti-Semitism and also Hinduphobia on their campuses and other institutions.
Thanks, Joseph. I remember there were certain unfortunate instances where Jewish students were walking on campuses, and people just like removing the yarmulkes, just like just ripping them apart, like out, just throwing them out, and then pushing people, assaulting, etc. And I know I went to Rutgers University, and there were a couple of instances there too, of some violence against Jewish students. Now Now, when it comes to sort of this, right, I know student groups have been organizing on college campuses to talk about this issue, but what has been the response from the administration, Joseph? Have they been, like you mentioned, that they need to be more supportive, but has there been any support from the administration and in terms of protecting Jewish students? There have been some statements that have been issued, I believe, but what kind of support have you been observing, or lack thereof, I would say?
Yeah, so some statements have been released that have condemned violence, but when criminals are not properly dealt with, when arrests are not made, when people who are assaulting students are not arrested, it's only going to allow that to continue. This is exactly what we've seen on Berkeley's campus, despite the administration condemning such an event as they should have. No arrests were made that night. As far as I'm aware, no arrests were made, although there is an open investigation. But when there isn't a meaningful response to violence and to criminal activity that is a result of anti-Semitism, it's only going to allow it to continue.
Yeah, it's quite unfortunate, and we can sit here obviously with a lot of different types of data points that come about. But speaking of data, Tammy, like you guys have been collecting a lot of data over the years, right? And so how does that data, what does the data show, right? If you have to take, let's say, 20 years worth of data about this stuff and compared to what's going on, you gave some very strong examples, 2,500, incidents, 900%, et cetera. Has that, obviously from October 7th, that has been there, but now has this data been presented to universities?
Sure.
And this discussion, what has been the response there?
Well, I mean, from 10/7 or before 10/7.
Both. I would like to know both. Yeah.
Yes, we've been presenting data every single time we do a report. We will present it to universities across the country, particularly the ones that are involved in our study. We usually study the 100 or so schools that are most popular with Jewish students, including Berkeley, including Rutgers. And we actually try to focus on what the issues are that are really creating the problem. And from our perspective, it has to do with things that, in part, with things that Joseph has brought up, which is the fact that either there aren't adequate rules, or the rules that exist at a university, the policies that exist at a university to address student behavior, like the harassment of Jewish students, are not being enforced. And this is a really serious problem, and raising the issue, showing how it is that Jewish students are not being equally, fairly, or adequately protected is one of the things that we do. Have universities responded to that? It's been a lackluster, I think, Joseph, that was your word as well, a lackluster response, in part, I think, again, to pull the camera out a bit, I think in part because the way in which the university operates does not, we are invisible. Jewish students fall between the cracks, and I would wager that Hindu students fall between the policy cracks of many universities. They're not seen as a vulnerable minority that needs protection. And I would say unless and until university administrators can recognize that Jewish students, Hindu students, but as I said before, all students deserve protection, adequate protection, instead of just some students deserving and getting the protection, that until they can actually see that nothing will be changed. And I think one of the things, if I could see the sort of the silver lining about 10/7 for Jewish students, is that the problem became really manifest in ways that it wasn't clear before. We've been talking about campus anti-Semitism, in my case, for more than 20 years. And writing reports and bringing data and, addressing the problems, talking about the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, which is really, in a lot of ways, at least for Jewish students, at the heart of the problem. And it's really an international movement that is really, designed to actually dismantle the Jewish state. But the way it plays out on college campuses ultimately hurts Jewish students as well as Jewish faculty. So we've been raising this, in so many different ways. But until 10/7, people didn't get it. People, like the average person, even within the Jewish community, many people did not understand how serious the problem was. And certainly almost no administrators understood how serious the problem was. But with this tsunami of anti-Semitic assaults and harassment of Jewish students that really just overflowed on so many campuses, so many people got involved. Congress got involved. The legal world got involved. There's an unprecedented number of lawsuits afoot on universities' campuses now in defense of Jewish students. So this issue has become, I would say, a number one issue, like a really primary issue for the Jewish community, but also in our government and on our, among university administrators. I mean, if you just think about the congressional hearings and what happened to several university presidents as a result of it. So in that way, 10/7 was a huge wake-up call. But I think one of the things that if we want to make some progress now that everybody's actually looking at this, I think that the best strategy is actually to say you need to put in place and adequately enforce policies that protect everybody equally. Everybody has the right to express their identity and not be assaulted for it. Everybody. And unless and until you can have that equality on a college campus, nobody will be safe. And unless and until you can address, and I think from our perspective, one of the key culprits in all of this is faculty. Unless you can address, because students come and go, faculty are here forever. In fact, faculty have more security than university leaders. Because if the faculty want a university president gone, they can make it so. So faculty, in some very perverse way, actually rule the university, and especially radical faculty who actually have a goal of taking over, ideologically capturing the university. As you were saying, Nikunj, in the Marxist spirit of really, this is the culmination of the slow march through the institutions that have really ideologically captured the university. We're just putting out a report this week, a very large and important report, I think, about Faculty for Justice in Palestine. It's a faculty group that was established after 10/7. It was a call from the BDS movement, the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions movement, which is again run out of Palestine, whose leadership includes groups like Hamas and Islamic Jihad. There was a call from the Academic Boycott of Israel group for faculty to come together in a group called Faculty for Justice in Palestine to actually really advocate essentially for purging not just Israel, not just dismantling the Jewish state, but purging Zionism and Zionists, meaning any Jew who doesn't disavow Israel, purging them from their own campuses. This is a faculty group, right? And at UC Santa Cruz, where I used to teach, within a few days, over 100 faculty members joined this group, including 60% of one department, right? So it's a faculty group who is organized to actually promote, as I said, the dismantling of the Jewish state and the purging of Zionism and Zionists from their university campuses. But they also work and they're also established to support the student group called Students for Justice in Palestine, which is the chief culprit and perpetrator of anti-Semitic incidents on college campuses across the country. In the 100 or so campuses that are most popular with Jewish students, we have over 50% of them with these Faculty for Justice in Palestine groups, and they're growing by the day. And they have ramped up their efforts. This year, they've already put out statements that they are ready to roll and to work with students and other faculty to essentially take over their campus so that there is no room. There will be no room for Zionists, for Jewish students, or Jewish faculty who support the Jewish state. This is reminiscent of what happened in 1930s in Nazi Germany to make the universities Judenrein, well, to make Nazi Germany Judenrein. But it started at the universities. And this is what's happening. I bring this as a cautionary tale for the Hindu community, because this is exactly what's happening to Jewish students right now. And if we can't address this large issue, if we can't take the bull by the horns and say, this is an outrage, there will be no room. And this is something that's just, it was inconceivable to me. And I've been tracking this stuff for 20 years. What we are facing now was inconceivable to me even 2 years ago.
Yeah,
And
no,
so
indeed.
And so anyway, that's what I really do think we have to address this at that level. We have to say, universities, this is unacceptable. This will not happen. If faculty do this, they will be dismissed. If departments embrace this, they will be dismantled.
No, indeed. And, it's thankfully the Hindu community is not at the October 7th level, which is good because we don't want to have violence against our community. But there have been instances of that on college campuses, but also outside. I think for the Hindu community, the key has been more about getting this cancel culture, the fear that if I'm going to say something, if I'm going to openly practice my traditions, I'm going to be canceled. So let's go into some of the Q&A because there's a lot of very interesting questions that people have asked. So we know what we'll do is let me start to sort of put together, we can go from the top, but I think, and Anjali, you can answer this one. One of the questions that comes in is the worst part of anti-Semitism is facing fellow Jews defending the terrorists who attack Jews. Are there parallels in the Hindu community? You want to take a shot at that?
Yes, so there are some parallels. There are definitely people who outright deny that their Hinduphobia exists, and who outright deny that we're like going through anything. But also within my community, there's some people that I work with who there is a parallel of them wanting to take the easy way out, I would say. I was working with someone for this protest that we did for Bangladeshi Hindus who are currently being targeted in Bangladesh. And my friend who was helping me was basically talking about how Hindus should only like take action. Like he was helping me with the protest with the goal being people should know that Hindus are being targeted in Bangladesh and that the UN should come in and basically help take Hindus out of Bangladesh, and that it's basically wrong. And for the Hindus in Bangladesh who are trying to make their own government, that's really not the right thing to do. And so what I thought of it was for the UN to come and help Hindus in Bangladesh, that would be more like running away from the situation, in my opinion. And Hindus feel like that's always the best option instead of facing it head on. And rather, we should support them in their goal in order to take control of the government instead, right? Instead of just running away, finding refuge in another country like India. And so I think that, and another thing is Hindutva phobia is what I kind of think of it as. People are scared of Hindutva when Hindutva just means Hinduness, right? Being Hindu, that is now apparently a bad thing. It's turned into something completely different. And all it is protecting Dharma. It's protecting our religion, our values. And it's now being ostracized, and Hindus are facing hate and they're being called right-wing just for standing up for themselves. So I feel like there are a lot of issues, and there are definitely parallels between the Jewish and Hindu community where our own Hindus are basically working against us in the long run.
Yeah. No, that's there. And this whole idea of, oh, let's just take all the Hindus out of Bangladesh. Let's take all Hindus out of Pakistan. Let's take all Hindus out of here. Well, where are the Hindus going to go? Why do we need to run away? Those are our indigenous lands where we have lived. Our civilization has lived for thousands of years. And just because we're being terrorized doesn't mean we have to leave, right? The solution should be they need to be protected where they are, not to be removed from there, right? So this idea that even within our own community, that first of all, they deny the fact that this is such a big deal. Oh my God, you're blowing up the situation. Even when people are getting butchered, like even in my own community, right? We talked about this. People ask you, oh, where's the data? Where's the data? Have you been hiding under a rug, or where are you sleeping? Haven't you like gone on social media to see the videos, the sort of the documentation? And there was a question here, where does how does mainstream like basically report Hinduphobia? There's a lot of coverage in New York Post, New York Times, etc., in different places about anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, that is a major problem for the community, our community, that the mainstream does not really report Hinduphobia as they should be reporting. If you think about the coverage about what happened in Bangladesh, not just today, but in 1972, when this issue first happened, and millions of Hindus were killed, hundreds of thousands of women were raped. A lot of things happened, and 15 million plus refugees came out of Bangladesh into India. Not a lot of people know about this. Senator Ted Kennedy himself visited Bangladesh, and he saw, and he actually put a statement in the Senate in the briefing that says the particular groups that were targeted were Hindus. And he used those words very specifically. So that is raw form of Hinduphobia. Unfortunately, doesn't come out because a lot of our community members don't want to talk about it. A lot of times, like I said, there's inherent anti-Hindu bias in media and academia. So when these instances come out, they're downplayed or flat out denied. So that is an important point. So I'm glad that somebody asked that question. We have a lot of work to do, and we will continue to do that. So let's move forward. Let's see. We'll go. I have a couple of things here that can be combined. Let's see. Are there any? Yeah, so like worst part of anti-Semitism is facing Jews defending terrorists. We talked about that. I think. Are there any violent groups? Yes, there are violent groups, unfortunately, out there. Thankfully, we have not. A lot of times the violence has come from sort of white nationalists who have just attacked Hindus walking on the street, calling them to go to hell, things like that have happened. But nowadays, the violence is not necessarily only physical, it's actually psychological violence. We have seen people being, canceled because they stood up for Diwali, as, celebrating Diwali as a holiday. People being canceled for the Rath Yatra, which is a sacred procession that's been going on. So this cancel culture is probably one of the biggest forms of psychological violence that our community faces, especially vulnerable children who are in high school or now in college, etc., and they get shy of celebrating their identity, celebrating their culture. So it's thankfully we're not seeing that kind of violent behavior, although it is changing. We're seeing violence from some of the Khalistani extremists who have been, like what Anjali said about targeting us on social media, vandalizing Gandhi statues, destroying statues. More recently, a temple in New York was vandalized just last week, things like that. So that vandalism has been going on due to an extreme hatred for things Hindu. And they conflate the idea, okay, they want to go protest against India for whatever reason. They keep using the word Hindu terror. They're not using like, governmental terror. And they're very specifically using words that refer to Hinduism and Hindus. Words such as cow piss drinker, pajits, like so many of these words are very, very connected to Hinduism and Hindu tradition. So there is no denial of the fact that these words are used to target and create that fear in the Hindu community, especially students who want to celebrate their cultural festivals and things like that. So now let's come to we have talked about that. I want to talk, I'm going to ask Kushi one question, then let's come to how we can support each other. So Kushi, you have been working in your universities to help recognize Hinduphobia, and you have had some good success there. So maybe share some insights into that. What have been some of your challenges, but also some successes there?
I think the biggest thing that also Tammy brought up, right? It's how do you quantify these incidents, right? Because the faculty is so, they push this narrative that, oh, we're not being Hinduphobic. It's freedom of expression, freedom of speech. And in our case at OCAD University, it's creative freedom, right? We're just critiquing your work. And when you get called a Hindu right-wing extremist just for making a project about decolonizing yoga, I don't think it's more so critiquing my work, right? So I think the biggest issue we faced at OCAD University was how, like, oh, this is the first time we're hearing about Hinduphobia. When we brought up, when our posters were vandalized, we went to the administration and they said, but Hindu students seem very happy here, right? And so how we tackled that was we opened up a Google form that students could document Hinduphobia. And then we rolled it out just to the Hindu Students Council, just a general group chat. We sent it there. And within like the first 48 hours, we had 30 entries of Hinduphobic incidents that students have gone through within like the last 2-3 years. And it ranged from like comments such as like a Kashmiri student was wished Happy Kashmir Day, which is a reminder of the genocide of the Kashmiri Hindus by a few Pakistani students 3 years in a row. right? The same set would come up to her and wish her happy Kashmir Day. A few other incidents were students being pushed to convert constantly by their Muslim peers. And it's unfortunate. And then other like comments by professors constantly, politicizing Hindu art, calling students to reconcile for the oppression of minorities in India whenever they're making Hindu art. And it could be anything ranging from yoga to like philosophy to Om, like, so all kind of things came up. And when we presented that data to the university, I think that's when they started recognizing the problem. And so we have been working with the university. Obviously, that is taking a lot of time and effort because we're trying to voice our issues, but then there's also an equal or even a larger amount of counter effort to, you know, um, disregard what we have to say about our experiences on campus. Uh, However, there has been a training that has been rolled out officially starting this fall for all faculty and students. So OCAD University rolls these trainings, the sensitivity trainings for Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and other forms of discrimination. They've formally included Hinduphobia this time. The biggest issue I think we've had is explaining to the university why Hinduphobia is important. A lot of the times, the feedback we got from the administration was, why should we include Hinduphobia when we include all forms of hate in our policies, right? And I think the answer to that is that Hinduphobia doesn't get recognized because there's no term to recognize it, right? The reason we don't have data for Hinduphobia in, for example, the hate crimes data for our police force, is because there's no defining term that says that, oh, like a temple being vandalized, or, like somebody constantly getting harassed online for being Hindu, comes under Hinduphobia. So I think it has been a slow journey, but we are working towards getting the term formally recognized in the academic and non-academic policies at OCAD.
That's awesome. Yeah, this is exactly the type of work that needs to be done on college campuses when it comes to the Hindu community. I know the Jewish community has been working on these, there's been resolutions and many policies, et cetera. So that's great. So we're taking those baby steps. And I think when you're pushed, back against the wall, you start to push back as well. And I'm really happy to see that that's happening on college campuses. Now there are a lot of questions. Obviously, we're running out of time, but what I want to focus on is kind of, and this is only one of the first, like we'll continue to do these series as we go forward every so often so that we can bring the two communities together. But how can Hindus and Jews work together, right? How can Hindus support Jewish students and Jewish groups? How can Jewish groups and Jewish students support Hindu groups? So maybe we can, I'll start off. One of the things, just like this, we need to have the forum of mutual understanding. I think celebrations of festivals and common traditions is another one. So that I know like Rosh Hashanah is coming up. We are going to go into Navratri, which is a very important festival for the Hindus as well. So there's a lot of these festivals that sometimes overlap, but also can be put together. There's Diwali and Hanukkah being celebrated in many places. So I think celebrations of festivals and bringing the communities just physically together to have a conversation, I think is important. Second thing is education, right? Sometimes education on our cultures, our symbols, etc., is there. So, for example, a lot of times there's a misconception that the swastika is actually an anti-Jewish symbol. And for many, many years, a lot of people had that misconception when Hitler never used the word, right? He used the word Hakenkreuz or the hooked cross, which is, and has been used in Europe for a long time. So we as the Hindu community since CoHNA was born, we have launched a campaign called Swastika Education and Awareness Campaign. And we have had conversations. Just last week, I had a conversation with the Holocaust Center in South Africa, right? Just way out there. So the idea is that building these bridges to understand that, hey, this is what's important for a particular community, while recognizing hate, while condemning hate, while building that mutual understanding. Similarly, I think educating each other about, hey, have you ever been to a Hindu temple? Right? Have you ever been to a synagogue, what goes on in a synagogue, what goes on in temple. So these are some concrete things that we have been doing from CoHNA, working with Jewish organizations, as well as different rabbis and things like that across the board over the last 4 years. So these are some ideas that we can do, but I want to also hear from our panelists. So maybe Tammy and Joseph, you can share how the Hindu community can support the Jewish community.
Joseph, do you want to do?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share just a little bit of what we've been doing at Berkeley. I think just first of all, for Hindu students and Jewish students to get together and talk with each other and understand that the issues that we're facing are very similar is an excellent first step. And then from there is to maybe attend each other's events, plan events together for our communities, to celebrate together and to come together, and also to be there in each other's times of need. The Jewish students showed up recently to a vigil at Berkeley that was to commemorate and remember the tragedy of the Bangladeshi Hindus of what's happening. And likewise, many Hindu students showed up to mourn with the Jewish students after October 7th. So I think that when we recognize our similarities and just come together to realize our shared and similar stories, I think that's how we can push through anti-Semitism and Hinduphobia together.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a wonderful solidarity event at Berkeley. Tammy, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I want to say one of the questions that was posed to us says we should remind ourselves that academic freedom cuts both ways. We have rights as well, rights guaranteed by the Constitution and upheld by the Supreme Court. And I want to say that this is really where in America, I can't speak for Canada, but in America, that is our biggest point of commonality, that we have a country that supports our right to express our identity, that supports our right, that gives us the freedom to practice our religions and to express ourselves in words and in any way that we want to express ourselves. That's called the First Amendment of the US Constitution. And again, I come back to this issue. We've been so caught up into our different tribal identity groups that we lose sight of the fact of what we're striving for as a country, which is that we are one ultimately, and if we're not one, then we're in big trouble. And I think that we need to resist the urge to say, this is who I am, and this is who you are, and we are fighting for whatever protections or privileges we want or think we deserve. And we should say, we're all human. This is what we all deserve. And what we need to do is to appreciate our common dignity and humanity, and to say that this is what needs to be protected and preserved. Again, it's not our identity that needs to be protected by our government. It's our right to express our identity, which really is a First Amendment right in our country. And it has so many robust protections in this country that I think, and it also is just so inspiring when you think about the dignity of difference, the way that but to understand, it gives, when we're not fighting for, whose group is going to get more of what, when we're not fighting and we can just appreciate the Hindu holidays or the Jewish holidays or the Talmud or whatever holy texts in the Hindu religion, if we can just appreciate each other, that's what we have when we focus on the fact that we all have the right and the need to express ourselves. And so I think again, we have to fight for these common values, right? The Jews, the Hindus together need to say, you need to allow all of us, any one of us, to express ourselves as we choose to express ourselves. If some Jews want to say they're anti-Zionists, then let them say they're anti-Zionist. But I'm not, and most of my people are not. But ultimately, if we don't have to filter ourselves through our identity, if we just say we are who we are and we have the right to express our identity, and we fight for that right for each other and for all of us, I think that's I think, yes, we need to celebrate each other's holidays and to be there for each other. But I think if we think of the projects that we want to put our combined efforts together to work on, it has to be for those rights that are for everyone. It has to be this equal protection, equal right of expression. And then, yes, we need to find ways to just for civil discourse, to find ways to be able to talk to each other so we can come to the place where we can appreciate each other wherever we are, whoever we are, whatever we believe.
Yeah. And, and as an immigrant and son of an immigrant, I can tell you one thing. My parents have always stressed that you are going to university for education first and foremost. That should be your focus, and that should be the primary focus. Other things that are going on are really important, but why does a university exist? A university, the first and foremost is education and providing that character to people. So I think it's also being forgotten, right, over the time because of what's polarization, a lot of what is happening, the fundamental idea of education and mutual respect and understanding, because we're ultimately building a better world for all of us. Because if we start to point the guns and arrows and whatever you want to say at each other, pretty soon none of us will exist, right? So that's really important for us to think in mind. So I want Kushi, any thoughts on your end? And we'll come to Anjali after that.
I think Tammy brought a really good point about education, because there's a lot of misinformation both ways, and I think it's important for us to approach unbiased resources for any global issue for that matter, and educate ourselves, and also just be good people first, right? Obviously, we all have our affinities, but I think it's so important to be a kind person, because we've seen Jewish students on my campus get assaulted in spaces, and it breaks my heart to see them being treated that way. One of my really good friends, she's Jewish. She stopped coming to school last semester. It was her final year. She didn't walk graduation. She didn't participate in a graduating exhibition, just because how she was treated not only by students but also faculty. There were threats written on the walls. If her number was leaked, people would call her. So I think it's so important not to get carried away, regardless of your political, affiliations, your political identity. I think it's so important to be a good and a kind person, especially when we're all at an academic institution. We're all there to get an education, right? So I think having compassion towards one another, despite our political beliefs, is very important. And yeah, and I think that's all I have.
Great. And last but not least, Anjali.
Yes, I agree with everyone. And about that student, that's very heartbreaking to hear that she completely stopped going to school. So I think definitely standing up for ourselves will help us be stronger in the face of all this, and hopefully we can avoid other students from having to face the same issues. And that would require us coming together as a community.
Great. No, thank you. And we can go on and on. This is a very touchy topic, but also very important. So we wanted to thank all the attendees today. I want to thank all the panelists for joining us for this important conversation. We will continue the conversation, but I also want to wish everyone the best of luck in terms of what they're doing on college campus. Stay safe, but also continue to educate, continue to come together, continue to promote mutual respect and understanding. In our community, we don't promote tolerance, because if you walk over to someone and say, "Hey, I only tolerate you," that's not good enough. We need to promote mutual respect and understanding, regardless of the differences. We don't have to agree with each other, but there's got to be a mutual respect for the greater good and greater peace. So on that note, I want to thank all of you. Namaste and shalom. Hopefully you can join us for the next round, and looking forward to continuing the dialogue with our Jewish brothers and sisters. Thank you and namaste.